Okay, we are live, and this is Senate Finance. We're starting a little late because the chair got tied up in a joint fiscal committee meeting. But we're gonna try and move this on through. First item today is S 181, that's the trying to find a funding source for the community media program. And we're looking at a excise fee, we're waiting to be told what it is, on streaming services. And please just take your seat up there. Because we don't want to you can. Okay, and this is Mr. Stewart, and if you, we just ask you to introduce yourself for the record, who you,
Sure.
who you represent, and then the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair Cummings, Vice Chair McDonald. My name is Danny Stewart. I'm here on behalf of Dish Network and DirecTV, and there are thousands of subscribers here in the state. All told, I believe there are approximately over 160,000 subscribers in total in Vermont. And of that number, some of Dish's streaming subscribers, and Dish has Slate is a streaming service, and DirecTV streams subscribers are included in that number.
Okay, you were, used to be a satellite, I had a dull thing on my roof. But I just saw an ad, might even in Maine this weekend, that you can now subscribe and you don't have to have the dish on your roof, so is that the streaming service?
Exactly that,
Okay,
and for both companies.
Okay.
And again, thanks for the time to perhaps I'd like to say respectfully walk through our opposition to the bill. And I think, I'm just thinking about this, perhaps our position would be better explained if I just explained the technology and sort of how we got here in terms of support for and paid programming. So originally, when cable service was the only video programming around, for cable companies to provide their service, they had to, of course, provide cable lines, physical lines to every customer. And to do that, they had to dig up city streets and sidewalks. Of course, they don't just take a backhoe and start digging away. You have to get permission from the landowner. In most cases, that would be some form of municipality, city, county, town. And say, may we use your property for our business purposes? And the answer, maybe somebody said no, but most of the time they say, sure, we'd like to have cable for our residents. You may do that, but we'll condition the use of our property on payments, essentially, or a Supreme Court called those rents. But it's referred to as a franchise fee. That's the payment made to put their infrastructure in the ground. And in doing so, when you engage in these franchise agreements, not only do you, of course, your cable company now get the ability to provide service to your customers, you also gain a very valuable right. That is the right to that right of way, if you will. The legal right to take up the street, the legal right to put your infrastructure there, and the legal right to repair it, modify, and so on. In fact, that right that they gain from paying the franchise fee is the largest asset on a cable company's books. They get something from it. I think Comcast actually values their franchise rights around Comcast. I think it's around 50 billion, give or take, and I think Charter is 60 billion. Those rights. Those rights, by the way, can be sold. If you'll recall, Charter purchased Time Warner Media about, I think, 2017, 2016. And you can find on the financial statements what they paid Time Warner for the franchise rights. I think it was around 40 to 50. That, by the way, that right to the right of way allows them to modify their infrastructure, such as also in that cable pipe putting in an internet line. So the pipe might have a couple of days through this. And that internet line goes physically to a customer's home and also provides them internet access. So the data comes through that line through the cable owned right of way and the cable paid for right of way through the cable pipe. People now access email, websites, and access to sports, news, weather, and also streaming services. All of the streaming service data is just intermingled in with all the other data that's the internet. There is no streaming service in the internet, it's all the internet. One important distinction, however, that I think is getting now to my point, is that none of the non-cable streaming services, such as Dishes Sling, such as DirecTV streams, they don't have any infrastructure right of way. They dug nothing. Indeed, if say Sling or DirecTV streams were to go down, the line could be severed. A customer wouldn't call DirecTV and say, get a backhoe and fix this. They can't. It's illegal. They would get in a lot of trouble for it. Trespassing on city property, trespassing cable property. In other words, there's no asset, there's no reason to pay that franchise fee. The other, what I'm getting at is this sort of counters that notion. I've seen it said, you know, they use the right of way. Well, streaming services don't use it in any way different than we do for our email. I believe this is being streamed on YouTube.
Yes.
This is, in that sense, using the right of way. They don't use the right of way for other sports or anything else, or any differently than they use anything on the internet.
So can I just, I'm just losing track of, you're opposing any tax on streaming, or you're opposing an infrastructure tax?
I think, as I understand it, the intent of the amendment is to put a tax on streaming services to fund
Yes.
the pay program. And I'll get to sort of why, but I don't, at the end, think that's necessarily fair public policy or the justification by which the cable companies fund it remains true, but that same justification doesn't necessarily apply to streaming services because they don't use the right of way like the cable companies do.
I get. So. Maybe this is just me, but I just never saw it as you're helping to pay for public access television because you use the right of way. I saw it as, we want to make sure that there's some local media because it's good for democracy. And so when our citizens pay their taxes for paid media content that looks like television, then some of that money goes back into our local television. So am I the only one, like,
No, we do have a franchise tax for cable. And we have tried to do some taxes on satellite TV. However, this little stream ran across the bottom of everybody's television set.
I think I remember that.
Yeah,
I remember the topic.
wasn't as bad as Big Bird, but almost. But how does satellite stream without using a cable? I'm missing that
Sure,
technology. If I can't, you can't beam it into my house because I don't have a dome. How are you coming to? How is your streaming coming to me unless it's coming in through the cable?
Exactly that. The satellite streaming service is the delivery mechanism is through the internet. It is not from the satellite.
Right.
But my point being sort of singling out the streaming users from any other part of the users of the internet is the point I was trying to make. It is not, because I've heard it said in other places, they use the right of way. I guess it's like, if this were 2000, say the year 2000, same discussion, we're looking for funding. But, and from a video service, well, it would be like trying to say, talking about putting a tax on the Netflix CDs. Because those CDs, when
Yeah.
they're delivered on the road, they use the right of way.
Right.
You might say, well, that doesn't really make sense.
What doesn't make sense?
The
Because
idea,
we're not paying for much else on the internet. Like, we are talking about taxing different things that come through the internet, cloud computing,
Right.
you know, digital subscription services that people receive for entertainment purposes.
And
But
again,
why does it matter?
to fund the PEG services, I'm not sure that necessarily is fair. The funding mechanism as it's always existed, the reason for cable funding was, that's why I went into that, sorry, long explanation of cable technology, was that because cable companies utilize the public right of way, when I did the federal law, it was viewed that they had to, because of that physical occupancy of the infrastructure, they had, therefore, that was the justification to make them, and that cost gets passed on to customers, make people support the paid programming. You know what I'm saying is that use, that justification on streaming customers, it doesn't really translate. Yes.
So the original bill was proposing a pole attachment fee to basically similar to what you just described, the rationale for the cable franchise fee, to collect monies from those using our public right of way that are distributing content, including Netflix and otherwise, to that piece of that supply chain. We shifted away from that because testimony said that the FCC said indicates, or federal laws can't say, as far as I interpreted it, from the testimony, that we can't collect monies for PEG from the use of our right of ways. But the cable franchise fee is in the original, as in your testimony. I love written testimony too. So I was following what you were saying, but if you do follow up with anything in writing, it'd be helpful for me to follow up on. But you're saying the original franchise fee passed for cable companies was just for the right of way, but it was allowed to use that money to pay for PEGs.
Wasn't allowed, they're required to support PEG.
Separate from the franchise fee for the right of ways.
It's, there's been a lot of litigation and back and forth at the FCC, so I want to be careful in terms of how it's divvied up. I don't remember bluntly, is the PEG support part of that 5% included within that franchise fee, or is it allowed to be a separate fee on top of that? What I do know is that regardless of the exact mechanism, it's all premised on the physical occupancy of the right of way.
And they were using that right of way to basically sell lots of content that wasn't created here in Vermont. And so that's where I'm betting that part of that was justified to be mandated to fund local, as Senator Winslow was talking about, the local capabilities and capacity to broadcast public access content. But you said that's not fair. What I'm not hearing in your testimony is that it's illegal or against federal code or against federal law for us to.
At the moment, no, I'm not saying, I probably would led to that.
Okay.
And there's another state that does this, is that?
No, it's been discussed in a few states. But, actually, to this point, a number of states, about 13 of them, and I think the most recent was Illinois, have passed laws making it clear that franchise fees do not apply to streamers. For that very reason, because the legislature felt that adding yet, and by the way, if this were to take place, this is related to this point. If we think about it, so right now, people already pay a franchise fee for that line, given cable and or internet. And then there is, I believe, a digital goods tax in the state. So this proposal will stack a third set, that I might argue, increasingly regressive taxes and fees on those who watch video services. I lost my point in responding to your question.
Something about the state.
So I want to slow down and make sure and distinguishing between the kind of content we're talking about and the physical infrastructure and technology. So when you're talking about, you're representing Dish and DirecTV, do you deliver content through wires or is it all, little dishes sitting outside people's homes?
Great question, and I apologize, I'm probably sure if I let this just do. But there are different services now. So traditionally, what most people are familiar with would be that satellite service, literally satellite beams from space
Direct to your home.
direct to your home. Okay. But starting in, I think, 2012, well, like my stuff, I think it's 2012 from Dish. It had a Sling service And that was, over the internet. That was a streaming service.
So satellite to a receiving point and then into the internet to deliver.
No,
Now,
no, I'm sorry. So the satellite service is satellite to that home to dish, straight to the dish. That's it.
that's the only way you sell content.
That streaming, so Dish Network has two ways. Either you put the dish on your house and get it from your satellite, or through the internet, and you can stream it just like you would YouTube TV or Netflix or Hulu.
But there's a difference because, I mean, I don't think you paid for YouTube from last time I checked.
I think YouTube TV is a service.
Oh, it's okay, so, but that's different than YouTube.
Correct.
So YouTube TV now is a content creation app as well.
Content creation, I think they deliver. I don't think they're, I gotta be careful. I don't really know, but I don't believe there's YouTube studios.
But there,
that
I
make-
mean, there's something that once upon a time we would have called it a television subscription service.
To YouTube, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
Although, as of
why
that
would we
point,
tax it?
content, a lot of content creators,
Mhm.
you're right. A lot of people with an iPhone and a stand provide a lot of content. And they just bump that onto YouTube, and it's used much like, I'm guessing it's being used this series.
Sounded right.
Yep, so, slowly following along.
Yeah,
So
sorry.
you have a second modality to get people satellite direct or into the internet like anyone else. Are you saying that because you're traveling over to someone else's wire, let's call it that, they're already paying a tax, so don't talk to you about a tax?
I wouldn't use that phraseology. I would say that I think there's some consideration, some thought in that the person, two levels here. One is the people who are paying it, they're paying the franchise fee to the wire one time. If they're streaming something, they're already paying now again for the digital goods tax that the state. And this proposal would say now you're gonna pay a third time. I would argue 3 times in a state, where I think it has a very high stream subscription rate. And again, at the end of the day, it is, Tracy said, regressive taxes, so I think there's a lot of folks, and I think that that's around 40% of states, 40 and unders, they're trying to save.
So the two taxes that are there now are the franchise fee, right, for the physical, for use of state.
Yes.
And then you're already, so just to make sure, for other services, other than the content you're delivering, are people paying a tax on that, a subscription to, I don't know, Paramount Plus?
I guess that's.
Yeah.
They're paying sales
Okay.
tax.
Yeah.
And now, so then, and this bill's talking about paying a tax on the content you're delivering. Why aren't you comparable in some way to Paramount Plus?
Oh, we are, so you're paying your franchise fee once.
Yeah.
You'd be paying your digital goods tax twice, and with this amendment, you'll be paying 3 times now.
That's not my intention, is it?
Okay.
My intention is not to have that configuration. My understanding is right now cable companies pay the 5% franchise fee and sales tax. We call it sales tax. You're calling it digital goods tax.
Okay, I'm sorry.
The state sales tax is 6%. So Adelphia and Adelphia Comcast pays 5% franchise, also sometimes called a gross receipts. I don't know, I'm getting there.
We're waiting for Kirby to, our lawyer is coming in.
Streaming services right now are just paying sales tax, 6%. They're not that.
Because they're using the cable system that has paid the franchise tax to run their cables. Generally, it's not downtown, it's on pole.
So if
They
your,
were paid for that too.
if your company pays the cable franchise fee, I would not want to have you pay it again.
And we don't pay that, our customers, well, we don't have any cable customers, but cable customers, that franchise fees pass through, so they pay that franchise fee. And then, and on top of that, they pay the sales tax, and with this amendment, on top of that, they pay another 5%.
Would not be my intention to do that.
Well, I think we are still exploring. We had some questions about whether this was legal, and we sent Kirby to talk to our poles and wires, legal person. And he's coming back. We also are not sure the streamlined sales tax let us do this, it is always possible, and we have been asked to put this in the general fund, if there is any. So, it's always possible, we won't find it. I think we're trying to find an additional funding source, because franchise fees were going down. The information we had last week was that they're starting to go back up. So,
If I may, and to that point, and I don't, I do have, I think the band report numbers, which shows franchise fees actually steady and then going back up, so that's pretty solid, and there's anticipated expenses going up, which I think is the basis for this conversation. But before I get to that, just one thing to think about, I don't think is universally true, but I know it's often true. You'll hear a lot about cord cutting. Yes, people are cutting the cord. You'll probably hear more from your constituents, I'd be shocked if you did, at least now and then, about the ever rising cost of cable packages, and the cost of video streaming packages and so on.
I hear it from my husband.
So that's why your revenues are steady, because although there's a cord cutting, the price goes up, so your 5% chunk goes up. So we're not, this discussion, by the way, is based in the anticipated increase in costs. And to that point, something to think about. Originally, I don't know, back 100 years, whatever, the way to disseminate information, local information, would have been the printing press, newspapers, pamphlets, what have you. Technology changes, and a more efficient way of providing that becomes this sort of studio TV, these pay stations, these community access television studios. But as we all know, for good and obviously, I think fair case to be made for bad, but the ubiquity of the internet and the cell phone have provided information distribution like we've never seen before. And it's not so much saying, do we need to not allow for the distribution of information? I think modern technology, which because it's better from newspaper cable, I think some thought might go into with respect to these anticipated future expenses. Are they factoring in like the use of YouTube, that we are not in a studio? This is done relatively, maybe not my budget right over here, but relatively inexpensively.
You're on YouTube right now.
So that's sort of my point. Would it not be at least fair before we add this third layer of tax on people to at least explore the concept of providing this same information, distributing the same information via the current technological ubiquitous means that are vastly more inexpensive?
Are you saying help public access be like YouTube?
Be like YouTube, I think, at least what I've seen in discussions from other states, they said, well, we like of the studios and some of this more expensive, somewhat dated equipment, or these very modern, very sophisticated equipment.
Who is, there's a lot of like, I feel like I'm having a hard time following exactly who you're talking about and what you're driving at. Are you saying that like our public access studios in Vermont want equipment that's too expensive?
I'm wondering, is it worth looking at the equipment that public access studios are utilizing, the most technologically current, which, as I understand it could be much cheaper than, say, equipment 20 years ago.
Okay, one more question. I've got Senator McCormick, because Kirby is here and he's going to tell us if we can even try to do this, that. So I'll take Senator Gray, but
Great.
no, first Senator McCormick. No, Senator McCormick first.
Okay.
He gets punished because he's quiet.
Fee by definition is just something, it's when you're paying the state for the service you're buying from the state, that's what a fee is. Would this all work better for you if we just called it a tax?
I think as I understood it, I wasn't actually clear, it was a pure tax on our objection really is based upon two things. One is stacking all these crazily burdensome fees on our customers. Two is, I don't think the rationale fits. It's somewhat, I guess it's video, but it's not, because I've seen this before, it's an argument that we use the right of way. My point is it's not any more than the internet that uses the right of way. So then why just single out video subscribers? If I have a tire manufacturing company with tutorials about how I build my tires, and I want to use that to sell, get customers, well, that's using the right of way. Anybody who utilizes the internet uses the right of way, exactly the same way, the non-cable
But-
streaming.
But those people, they're not charging Vermonters for a transaction.
Oh, I'm sorry.
If they're doing tire tutorials, are they charging for those like their streaming service?
Say they buy the tire because they got sold on the tutorial.
Okay, I got one more question, and Kirby is not here for 181, that's coming tomorrow. We're gonna start our walkthrough of the housing bill, which is why the realtors have come through the door.
I have 117 part question. Okay, so what's in the bill that's distinguishing you from anyone else who's already addressed? And I mean, you're saying this is a third tax on top. How are you being sort of labeled, classified, distinguished, something that's picking up you and,
Well, it's because it's from streaming companies.
okay, and so, if I just go to sort of the simpler physical world, let's say, there's taxes on roads, there's taxes on the vehicles that go on the road. So the whole idea of the internet getting taxed as infrastructure. and
There's
the
tax on the
vehicle-
gas that goes in the
and,
car.
Yeah, thank you. So that's right. So we end up taxing in multiple ways. And you might just say, well, we paid for the highway, everything else, forget about it. So I get your analogy, but there are other ways in which we do layer things depending on, and if there's a value under, if there's a transaction that's of value to the corporation, then I think that's where we might say, okay, there's an opportunity to raise money that also delivers a public service. And you can say, well, why pick on us? But,
So for this way, I guess I have to say to that extent that
and I'd say, because you're on the highway.
it's. And again, I'm just curious, and I haven't seen the numbers, because this would be telling people, regardless of whether you watch the programming. And even though you already pay franchise fee, and even though you pay the sales tax on video, we're forcing you to pay specifically to pay for these paid channels. I'm just curious, do you have a rationale for that? The paid channel said, yeah, like here's our viewership. And here's why we have the need. I say that because if I came here and said, look, economic development program, help my company, and just give us a $10 million tax break. What for? I can't, I don't have the details. Can you just do it?
They did, yeah, I mean, like,
I think we can say that highways are old and cars are old, and we figured out the taxing structure for that. The internet, in the scheme of things, and streaming services and everything else is new, and we haven't figured out if there is a reasonable way to tax it. We know we are limited because of federal authority. And so this has been kind of an exploration into our ability. And we may not end up going there.
One final thought, and again, from my perspective, right, but it's maybe a little like you have toll highways, if your car is going through, you have to pay for your car. This to me somewhat seems like saying, well, on top of that, you gotta pay for all the passengers in the car. It's just make them pay again and again and again. The cable line is still the same cable line. Again, they've already paid for it twice.
Okay.
So,
Just to complement this story with you.
We will take this back up, probably tomorrow. But, we do have to get the housing bill out of here before crossover. And it is, how many did we get it down to? It started 86 pages. It's down here.
It's like 57.
Yeah,
9
76.
we beat that.
Six?
There you go.
76.
Okay. And we're just gonna walk through the tax sections today.
And we got this big concern raised about the governor's TIF language. Herbie can
Well,
help out.
that came out.
No, it's it's in one of their tax proposals,
Okay, yes.
and all of a sudden, it's like we did something that I can say.
Well, the tax commissioner is looking forward to talking to this committee. So, he will be here. I'm surprised we took it up and he isn't. But this is just our first one, right? So thank you. Did you come any distance to be here?
all of these was a lovely drive.
Okay,
So,
yeah. You
Um,
got a lovely day from Vermont,
Yeah.
Albany, no snow, no slush.
no, it's,
Yeah.
but, well, thank you so much. I really do appreciate the engagement. So, and Chris should have my contact information. So if you have any questions, I'm sure you will. Please let me know.
Okay.
And I'm willing to come back to talk some more about this.
Thank you, because to get an actual industry representative in here is somewhat rare. And so I really appreciate you doing it.
Bring some visual, like picture graphics, infographics of what you're
Well,
saying.
well,
It's different.
I understand the point that, yes, just like cars, we have found different elements and things we can tax. You debate whether or not we should do that, but, this was an exploration. Or you may not find the pot of gold at the end. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Perfect. We were trying to get Ellen and other people in here because I want the committee to go through the whole bill and understand what we're doing. But our real focus is the tax. Yeah. There aren't that many, I don't think at this point. Did we take out? I'll let Kirby go where we're starting.
Good afternoon, from people of the council. Yeah, I think that John and Ellen, who are the two other, attorneys working on this, had conflicts this afternoon, and that's why I'm solo. But I think they're aware that this committee is interested in.
Well, we'll start with that, the taxes.
Well, let me send it to you. Thank you.
Finance section. Okay. So where would be a good place for the committee to start looking? Page.
Yeah, we'll start looking at section 27 on page 29.
And it says taxes.
Is that after the tax credit change?
Yeah,
Is that because the tax credit changes the appropriation?
There was an increase in the downtown tax credit.
Right.
You don't think that's still in here?
No, it is.
it
Yeah,
is,
and
it's,
that would get set for the.
it's section 22 of the bill, and it's not in the taxes section. I believe it was drafted by Don or.
I don't know, I just didn't know if that was relevant to this committee, to just highlight that it.
We usually downtown tax credits go through here, we approve them, then they go to appropriations. Who decides, I guess we decide that it's a good thing, you know,
Right.
many committees,
Right,
and then appropriations tells us. Not
Right.
this year, it isn't a good idea,
Yeah.
so.
so this section just increases the cap.
section which again, please?
They were referring to section 22, but that's going to be covered by, one of the other attorneys who drafted it. That way.
Yeah, I'm just saying while we're looking at it. If people want justification, we could get the right, the council person in, but it's.
Well, we're gonna get them all in and walk through the whole bill, so.
Oh,
We know,
Oh, I'm sorry.
So we know in
Why?
context
Yeah,
what we're doing,
Okay, got it.
okay?
Okay,
We try not to rewrite those committees,
great.
all of our education, we have.
Yeah, no, I just thought it was like, we were just doing the
No,
tax.
we're just gonna do the taxes today, because I want, but I want us to walk through the whole
That
bill
makes sense.
whenever, you know, that was this, that Ellen,
Mm-hmm.
right? John, seems to be a little easier, but maybe not.
Randy.
He's giving himself too much
So
responsibility.
she's in.
Who is?
Oh my gosh.
Sorry.
That wasn't funny.
Who's in the hospital?
Nobody's.
No.
Nobody's in the hospital.
Nobody is.
Okay, good.
It's too believable.
Let's move this forward.
All right, so
Okay.
starting with section 27 on page 29, we have a change to the property transfer tax. There's a few changes in here. One is to increase the exemptions for the principal residence rates for residences that were purchased with a mortgage from Vermont Housing Conservation Trust Fund or Vermont Housing and Finance Agency or the USDA Rural Development Program. So that's an exemption that currently exists. It's $110,000. The first $110,000 is not taxed in the transfer tax. This is increasing it to the first
It's not
$150,000.
taxed, or is there a lower rate on it?
No tax shall be imposed on the first $110,000
Okay,
value.
That's what the bill's doing. My memory, and it's been a few years since I retired, maybe I'll look to the realtors, is there a lower percentage on that first 100,000 of the property tax? I thought there was a set
So the-
number.
If I may, yeah, Peter Tucker for the Vermont Association of Realtors. I believe what he's referring to is if you go through VHFA,
Yeah,
you get a wave on that first, it used to be 110, now it's,
Okay.
you know,
Mhm.
close to 50.
okay, so it
If
is
you
like-
didn't, but you were still a primary
Yeah.
residential taxpayer, then you had a 0.5% on the same,
and
the same
amount.
range, and then, you know, went up
I
there.
guess I never did VHFA financing, but I remember
Well, you
computing
know, you
that
get education
Yeah.
and it's,
it was like $200 or something. Yeah, okay. So this is just dealing with, and I remember we got to that and said it's just dealing with the VHFA. Does anybody know about veterans? Because I did a lot of veterans housing loans. Are they included in any of these?
I didn't talk about that.
I don't remember hearing about
I haven't looked at the exemptions for property transfer tax in a while. There are a lot of them. There may be a veteran exemption there.
Okay. it. Just those
Something I have to
veterans
look at later.
that you say used to get a fair number of mortgages or subsidized.
Yes, a big picture question, is this revenue neutral, revenue positive, negative for the PTT?
The increase for the exemptions would cost something.
Yeah.
For this group, I mean, JFO obviously is the best
We'll have
source.
JFO in the,
But there's not a lot of transfers that happen using these kinds of mortgages, so it is not unreal. If you increase the exemptions for all principal residences, which is this exemption here that's not changing, that's a lot of transfers, that would be costly.
this is just for,
It's
It's
about
percent
200 to
cost.
300 properties total. So it's, and then it's some percentage of those per year that would turn over.
but these are for non-homestead properties, right? If you're buying.
Oh, are you talking about the tax or the
tax.
exemption?
The tax
Oh, yeah,
is on
sorry, yeah.
second homes only non-primary resident.
Yeah.
Where they don't
We haven't
file.
gotten to that yet.
Sorry, I'm sorry, remember that.
Yeah, you probably won't get
So-
one of those on.
The next change in this section is to introduce a new different rate for particular types of properties. And the properties are principal residences that are, I'm sorry, residential properties that will not be used as a principal residence. That would be something that's declared by the purchaser at the time of the transfer. And for which the transferee will not be required to provide a landlord certificate. So in other words, what this is trying to get at are second home purchases that will not be rented out as long-term rentals. So for those properties, the rate would be 2.5% of the value. And for comparison, say the default rate is 1 1/4. So it's twice, that,
Then plus the clean water. That's that,
and the clean water surcharge would be on top of that.
and that doesn't change.
What about the clean?
Doesn't that come off in like 27? We did some,
What's that?
We,
financing.
yeah, we did, I remember
It,
the
I-
former
sorry.
chair of economic development and I taught it. Because it was to clean up the lake and basically new homeowners are gonna pay for it. And I can dump all the phosphorus I want in my lawn. And I'm not paying anything for it, so. That part of it does go to the clean water fund.
So the rates were reduced in 2027, and then the sunset, I think, is 2039. So those are that's the first section.
Is there any special treatment for first time home buyers? Relative to people?
We have there's a first time home buyer grant program in the bill separately. But we didn't do a first time home buyer tax credit. And many of the VHFA program folks are first time home buyers.
There is a first generation program.
Sorry, it's a first generation there's $1 million for first generation grant support, so you can put your down payment on and become a first generation home buyer. The VHFA piece captures, you know, a chunk of those first generation or first time home buyers.
So let's finish walking.
Yeah, there are several exemptions that I looked at recently. I wish I could tell you more about the exemptions, but
We need 6,000.
the next section here, it's
More expensive on the.
Okay, we go, yeah.
the next three sections change the allocation for property transfer tax revenue. So the additional new revenue that's created by the second home rate that we was looking at. The end result of these three sections changing the language around allocation results in 70% of the new revenue going to the Housing Conservation Trust Fund and 30% of the new revenue going to the Municipal and Regional Planning Fund. So there's a lot of language here, but what I just said is sort of the end result of that. For the revenue that's currently being generated by the property transfer tax, the bill leaves that as it is. So that's this language and this language.
What do we repeal?
And this is that's just current law repeal, so.
Sorry,
Yeah, this is, that's the general fund that you're looking at there that had revenue sources that were repealed. And then,
but better, let's,
Similar question to the chair, why aren't we repealing those repeal lines? What, like this opportunity of getting rid of them?
it can, I mean, there's a process for doing that. We tend to not do it because especially if you change the numbering, it changes cross references and things and it can cause a lot of problems. So the simplest thing is to just put repealed in there, because you're not messing up with other ways the law operates. So anyway, section 31 is, there's the next two sections deal with an annual transfer of $2 million of property transfer tax revenue to the Act 250 permit fund. So this would be a new allocation of property transfer tax revenue. And the order that it would go,
and where is that coming from? It's coming from,
it's coming off the top of where the property transfer tax
Okay,
revenue
okay.
is allocated to the three different funds. like currently, there's 2.5 million that already comes off the top to pay for bonds for VHFA. And then this would come after that and be 2 million for the Act 250 permit fund.
And Senator Hinsdale, would you like to tell us why we're giving money to?
The Act 250 permit fund.
Yeah.
There's two reasons and I hope it'll become more obvious when we look at the rest of the bill. Number one is, the NRV's estimated that, they would be foregoing fees from other projects that would no longer have to go through Act 250 under the exemptions contemplated both in our interim exemptions and in the long-term stakeholder report, about new exemptions. That is to the tune of about $900,000 a year that they think they'll be foregoing. And then we've asked them to do a lot of new things per these reports and studies, to approve town and regional plans, to look at these land use maps, et cetera. Maybe to have a bigger part in, other decision-making around, Act 250 and the new land use maps and tiers. And they estimated that that would also be about $900,000 million. So because of the money we're taking away from them, from existing fees, which by the way comes from a lot of affordable housing folks and state projects, we would be replacing it this way instead, and then we're asking them to do new things.
So
Look at the affordable housing and priority housing projects we exempted last year.
That was priority housing projects in designated areas, but Evernorth paid $100,000 left for a non-designated area.
So we are taking money away from the board by exempting at least in the interim until new rules are set. So they're going to lose money because there's fewer people coming before them, fewer deposits. So this is an attempt to replace some of that money. They also want to be doing work.
So I get it for, if we're asking to do the work. If they're not reviewing something, they don't have expense either. That, so lost revenue, lost tax. That would seem like it'd be revenue neutral.
I mean, they still have overhead for continuing to do what we asked them to do, just move more exemption. So there's that, but we are asking them to play a continued role, and I think so is everyone's bills,
I
right?
think
Like,
if we go through the whole bill, we'll understand what's going and what's coming. And then we can decide if we want to pay for it.
and I think H687, that's being discussed in the House, also gives NRV more responsibility, that they don't have a revenue source.
We are going to coordinate all of these. I mean, this one's going out of here. I haven't seen the House bill. I assume we'll go to natural resources too.
Natural Resources has possession of 311.
This would be a great convergence. Post crossover.
Yeah. Plan.
As long as we get
Bring it
something
in.
intact
You
from
may
the
be
House.
here late. Yeah, because that could be quite, I have this bill of converging water sources and a rapid coming to its.
We're coming back to PFDs after rating.
Okay. So. Yes,
Last year, we passed a bill which encouraged the development of more affordable housing on sewage systems that discharged raw sewage into the rivers and streams of the state.
Are you talking about the PHPs? That was one project. One project benefit.
You were taking dwellings and making them into additional apartments of living.
Oh, so you mean the duplexing and quadruplexing
Yeah.
provisions? Okay.
So,
It's not just affordable housing.
but when we go to mobile home parks, just from page 1 from 10 to 75,
Mobile home parks.
on the first page of the bill,
Okay,
it provides. It encourages building, being less active, 50 review over large projects in places that have municipal sources.
Municipal water.
And there's no provision in there for saying, except where those sewer systems get overflowed
That's,
you'll have.
and discharge raw sewage into the street.
I mean, first of all. There are, I mean, I hope you all know this as well as we do, there are separate wastewater permit bills. I mean, there are separate wastewater permits, the Act 250 is a land use law, not a wastewater law,
Still
so.
have to get.
In fact, we took out our non-duplication of wastewater permits because we understand the need for a statewide wastewater system.
Do we have one?
Yes,
Yes,
I'm
But
for
why?
it.
I mean, are we gonna litigate the whole bill right now? Because.
No, I think we're
No,
just.
I just,
Yeah,
last year, we provided incentives to speed up the process of having more housing in towns that had municipal sewer systems.
we said they could duplex and quadruplex by right, that's gonna be a really slow process.
Okay,
We need scale, which is what.
That's what we-
the other-
said. We agreed that that's what we said.
That we said what? That we're gonna do that, we're gonna exempt duplexing and quadruplexing on municipal water.
We're getting out of context here. We are working on the tax sections today. When.
I understand, Madam
Okay,
Chair. Last year, we,
yes,
in our eagerness to provide affordable housing, we made exceptions that allowed more raw sewage to go into the streams of the state.
no,
No.
No.
it's not.
Well, so.
No, you have to have a septic,
Yeah,
you have to have septic capacity in a wastewater permit.
So,
yes, and I think Senator McDonald has been keeping an eye on this for us for a couple of years, like. We have CSO events around this,
Yeah,
and when we do
Yes.
development in towns that are experiencing CSO events.
Concern.
We're adding volume to a system that's already experienced overflow, so conceivably, we're also adding to the CSO events, that's, I think, what we're getting at. Right,
so money that's being collected isn't going to stop the CSO events, it's going for planning in this bill?
The increase in the property transfer tax is going to regional planning.
if you now pay a municipal and a state wastewater permit separately. If you're going to change the use or add more housing, so that's a separate fee. This is talking about land use.
So I'm not disagreeing.
Yeah,
with you.
yeah.
Last year,
Mhm.
we encouraged more construction of affordable housing in towns that had sewage systems that have CSO events.
Yeah.
Yes,
City of Montpelier would be one.
and we,
We encourage more housing period, than it to be affordable. We encourage more housing,
whether it was affordable or not.
right?
So it appears that this bill continues to do the same thing.
Yes,
Last year, I was told that I voted for the bill.
you didn't vote for the bill. You didn't vote for the bill, so I don't know what
Trust me, you lost a bad.
This- Well, then I'm wanting to repeat my name.
Okay, that's fair.
Okay,
That will deal with the natural resources. We do have some
Yeah.
cities mostly that the original infrastructure was not built with the. In those days, if it's usually when there's a heavy rain event and you have combined water, sewer and water. You will, there's a little thing and when it gets up, it pops and goes
Yeah.
into the river.
I'm aware of that.
It is a very expensive digging up all the city streets and doing new sewer lines.
It's a lot cheaper to put allows the raw sewage to go into streets.
It dissipates within 3 months.
And
So where are you hoping to get the revenue to fix our sewage problem?
after we permit the additional housing,
No,
Get more revenue.
or
no, we have the problem now.
We have a property tax problem because we have so few properties carrying the burden of municipal services, including wastewater and stormwater management, as well as our education fund. So it, to me, is a bit of a specious argument to say we have a sewage problem, but we somehow want to fix it by not allowing more housing. How does that get you the revenue, the resources you need? And plus, many of those people are living in unsafe situations, overcrowded situations in motels, or out on the streets where their feces are just
Okay,
everywhere.
okay,
I don't
this is getting
disagree.
off topic. And when you
Wanna
build
make sure you
affordable
understand
housing,
before I, or not.
okay, but you need balance, and if all we build is perpetually affordable housing, meaning people who can't afford market rent, there are also people who cannot afford to shop in your downtowns. So we need to allow, if we're gonna have vibrant communities, I'm still looking for one. If anyone would like to go Swanton with me, or up in the kingdom. But we need to have balance, and this one is looking at some mixed use, but mostly it's affordable housing. To take care of the 500 some families that are gonna be out on the street March 1st. Or March 1st. So, we're trying to build some more. This is, but a lot of the exceptions could go to others, but we also do need, as a state, to think about upgrading our systems. And, that's very expensive. There are no more federal grants. And 40 pounds are pretty stretched right now, so we need a bigger home space. So we're gonna try and build. We're getting on top there.
We're raising a little money here at Coastline Planning,
Yes,
but it's not going to the, it's not going to the sewer system.
yeah, we are not raising enough money to, pardon my pun, put a drop in the sources.
Yeah.
I mean, we're talking multi-billion,
Oh,
not,
I understand.
well, I see my 13 million.
But on
years.
top of, so what you could talk about is there is 0.2% that goes to property transfer tax that's separate for clean water. You could always propose to raise that to 0.25%, whatever you want, but that's actually a separate assessment of the property transfer tax.
It still won't raise enough.
No, I know, but that is its own revenue source coming out of this thing.
Okay, so we have agreed that we have a problem in that some of our septic systems are old and are not. They are capable and they have capacity during normal time. When you have 100-year rainfall, I have literally seen the water coming up out of toilets downtown.
Right.
They don't have the capacity to handle that sudden rush of water. But you would have to, and the state required that you do combined sewer overflow. I remember doing several projects in Montpelier, and new ones would come with modern capacity, but yeah, become an issue.
I mean, it's a design feature, right, to protect the wastewater treatment facility. And it works most of the time, and what people would say, oh, it works when it's overflowing, it's because otherwise you will purge all the bugs that live in that wastewater treatment plant and do all the digesting, would get swept away, and you'd have no real wastewater treatment plant left.
You would not,
You have a big tank of
and you
dirty
don't
water,
have
no
grease,
bugs.
yeah, you don't have grease filters on your restaurants. The little bugs die and don't digest the stuff.
Then you have to get probiotics.
Yes.
Wastewater
for the
treatment
wastewater.
facilities are all.
There is a reason for that, but
There's also $1 million in this bill for septic upgrades, that's in the governor's budget as well.
so can we get back? Kirby, have we gone through the tag section?
No.
Okay, let's
We
do
were-
ours today.
We were at the transfer, property transfer tax revenue for $2 million for the Action 2 permit fund.
Right.
And I was about to tell you that there's also an inflator here built in, so that 2 million transfer is inflated each year.
And if the housing market doesn't inflate, well, look at it.
This was the suggestion of Jim, to base the inflation on consumer price index for urban consumers.
Okay. Well, and we will have Jeff in.
Oh, wait, is that voice always here?
What? I mean, no, it's
Okay.
new. I don't know what's coming. We have retired heating and stuff under us.
We have that just a bit larger.
Can you tell them?
Just control F1, it'll hide that bar at the top, and you'll have more screen.
Yeah, that's good for me. I don't know about
Yeah,
Well, I could do it.
okay, yeah, I think it's good.
Thank you.
Okay,
Leave it alone.
so. The next 4 sections. The next 5 sections are related to a property tax. Property transfer tax exemption, or education property tax exemption, rather, sorry.
Okay.
There is a property transfer tax exemption later, but we're dealing with, there's a new property tax exemption that applies to education tax. With an option for municipalities to opt into and apply it to municipal tax as well. I should have said from the outset, this is an administration proposal.
Yes.
We would have said it for you if you didn't say it.
And the chair has voiced her skepticism. The tax commissioner is looking forward to coming in and convincing us to.
So what it does is it creates a new property tax exemption for new construction and rehabilitation of principal residences located in certain designated areas, those areas being designated downtowns, village centers, neighborhood development areas, and new market tax credit areas. I'll go ahead while I'm at it, jump into the TIF problem.
Yeah, thank you, yeah.
There's a provision that does not allow this exemption to be used in a TIF district, which would mean that if you're in a designated area and that's also overlapping with a TIF district, the exemption would not be allowed.
I can see why Rutland is upset about this.
I don't know a lot about their TIF, but I imagine it probably covers their entire.
They have a big TIF and they have blighted properties, so I can see them losing the value of this,
So.
and they wrote to us.
Does this contemplate exempting the entire property tax or just any incremental increase?
It's the increase, it's the it specifically, it freezes, freezes the value, the added value from the construction or the rehabilitation. For, in this version of it, it's 2 years. The administration originally proposed 5 years. So yeah, any increased value due to construction or rehabilitation is exempt from education property tax during the time. The municipality may vote to also apply it to municipal taxes. To use the exemption, the property owner must gain certification from ACCD. The agency can revoke the exemption if the requirements are not met and are not continuously met. If this exemption is revoked by ACCD, the property owner is required to repay taxes that were previously exempt with interest. And the exemption includes safeguards that the property will not be used for short-term rentals and that current tenants will not be unfairly displaced while the construction or rehabilitation takes place.
And this could also be, I build my personal home, right? Said personal properties.
Right now.
I think the administration's rationale, tax commissioner explained it, I think, in infinite detail, is that this will be an incentive to encourage more development and to encourage it more quickly by lowering the cost of development and rehabilitation, and it's to get more housing built more quickly. That's the rationale in action.
And we'll have Joe go see, your free testimony.
Well, this would be Bolio and Alex Farrell.
Well, we had the commissioner in, and I remember asking her if there were any studies that said the fact that your property value went up when you put a lot of money into it. Was there any study that said that taught people for building? And she said no, that this would be something extra we could give to them.
I think that was, I could be wrong, because I was
Commissioner Gold.
well, because she was in on the disaster recovery tips, which we took out. But these were never her section, so I think she was saying she thought the
Well,
TIF and for disaster recovery was gonna help
we
them
will
build.
see if anyone Because
Right.
this does, given the state of the property.
When would the, I'm sorry if you said this, but when would the 2-year window of avoiding taxes on the incremental start? What triggers the 2-year window? It wouldn't just be 2 years from when we pass this law, it'd be 2 years from what moment?
When we find it.
When you apply for this, I'll find that part for you. When you get a certificate of occupancy, so there's just a lot of, I'm intrigued by this, I can see the merit of it, but I don't see how logistically it would work.
I think it was from when you started construction.
Uncertainty around.
It's the, yeah,
There's,
like it's the 2-year window start.
and if you don't know this, I can, we can come back to it.
Yeah, we'll have the proponents.
It will be hard to find that.
Exemption.
871 of the subchapter.
And so we're at, let's see, it must be the next section.
I didn't mean to throw a curveball, Kirby, if you.
No, it's okay, I'm just not recalling, I mean, I think.
When would you like to start?
Well, that's an important question. If you're about to buy an investment speculative property,
Yes.
when that starts, it's gonna be an important consideration.
Of course, the value wouldn't start going up until you started making.
So there's a long time window of speculative properties that you wanna rehab.
The only thing I deliver on this is you won't have very much improvement in less than 2 years.
Sure.
Yeah, Miss, just introduce yourself for the record.
Yep, Peter Tucker from Realtors for the record, and I'm on 6.1, so I'm not exactly the same place, but the subject shows start the first property tax year immediately following year in which the application for exemption is applied for. A, the issuance of a certificate of occupancy, property's owner declaration of ownership of the qualifying property as a homestead. And those two. I mean, I'm thinking about a piece of land that you bought, and when you finish the house and you get your CO, that's when you would want it to be 2 years of play, or afraid over the next couple of years, yeah.
Starting to get that CO.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yep.
And I just want to stop and say, this is what we were discussing when it became clear to me that the tax department has the ability to understand whether you're using something as a second home or a short-term rental. So the tools are at their disposal to be helpful in other ways than just saying, we want this for our property tax freeze. But I was grateful to the commissioner for kind of acknowledging that that is a system that they can start to build for a larger volume of transactions than this small one and the property transfer tax. But I just want to be clear, this is for me where the light bulb went off, that they are able right now to use tools to tell the difference.
I'm just not sure that if I build my personal mansion, that the state of Vermont should give me 2 years of the value of raw land.
Yeah.
I mean, this isn't any housing.
I would support that further
Yeah.
establishment.
I thought it was for downtown, so I heard that. Like,
Or
Neighborhood
neighborhood
development
markets,
areas.
or neighborhood development areas, or village centers, or town centers.
that makes sense. There's a big
So-
mansion on the hill, yeah.
Yeah, but
But it's a
you
single
could
family home.
have an old, industrial thing downtown and make it into a really nice walk. This is the ed fund, and we're gonna be discussing it in 10 minutes. And I'm just loath to take money out of it at this point, because the property taxpayers of the state are paying for this.
We thought maybe it should be to promote multifamily housing. But we didn't change it yet.
Yeah, but we'll get it after 2 years. I it seems that you did do it for 5 years.
But this is a lot looser than a tip.
Yeah. It's like super micro mini tip.
There are other things that I might be more open to talking about, small tips. like public infrastructure in order to serve those houses. Or infrastructure to fix your line super overflow. That I might talk about it too. But not any house. Kirby, we've got 10 minutes. You think? we can
Okay,
finish up?
yeah, let's fly through it here. So to go along with that exemption from before, there's just some necessary sections to, that are more technical. For instance, under current law, exempt properties are required to have an insurance replacement value noted on the grand list, so the grand list value is not blank. So there's a section that clarifies the properties using an exemption from the section should not have an insurance replacement value listed on the grand list. Instead, it should be the full fair market value, even though it's being taxed at that frozen amount, the full market value should be on the grand list.
The town would want to catch you unless they decide
I-
to be altruistic, you would still need to pay your municipal tax.
That's true.
So they would.
That's true, the town, and it's also just, because there could be confusion, because it's an exemption, the listers might say, well, what value, what, but, so it's just, it's stressful.
Yeah, well, if you go to sell it, you look at what it's, the lister has it listed at, and it says $2,000. And you're trying to sell it for 500,000, they're gonna wanna know why. So you need a true value something.
Yeah, so that's gonna be on there, and then, there's this, the entire exemption sunsets July 1st, 2037. And there's some sections just, cleaning up that sunset and restoring the insurance replacement cost section, stuff like that. So those are the next few sections. And then section 23. Or I'm sorry, section 35.
Yeah.
20, it was 23 in the middle. Get my other here page. I guess I'm 35.
I've got section 41, 43, and then
Section
6.
Section 38 on page 45, some of my documents here are from different versions. So here's, so this is the property transfer tax exemption, it's, a property transfer tax exemption for transfers of blighted dwellings that will be rehabilitated as principal residences. Just 3 years to do the rehabilitation. The definition of blighted. Or heated rehabilitation, principal residence, rehabilitation. And the final part we have here is an income tax change that allows certain medical expenses to be counted as the medical expense deduction currently.
But how did that end up in the housing then? I do not remember this.
I don't know the history of it. I did not personally include it. It ended up in the tax sections, but it wasn't when I was there. I think it was someone requested and
Okay,
maybe the chair of Senate Economic Development.
I don't.
I'm sorry,
what you're talking about.
Somebody put it.
This, you mean the Wig Robin? Exemption?
Yes,
Oh, is that what this is?
Yes.
That's in the bill?
Okay, well,
so the things there that are highlighted that are being, what that does is if those things are no longer excluded from the medical expense deduction per month.
So the argument, yeah, it's called the Wake Robin tax, and I think that's still fair shorthand. But it is a tool that would be very helpful for people to be able to afford long-term care and senior housing at the same time. Because Wake Robin has you pay your long-term care costs upfront so that if you need additional care while you're there, you don't have to leave and go to another facility. And yet that's not tax deductible. I think there are other senior housing to long-term care, communities that would like to start creating this financing mechanism because it's really a way to stabilize seniors and allow them to age in one community.
We will look at this, yes, Wake Robin is unique, it does not accept Medicaid. There's one other nursing home in Camp, and
Thompson's,
yeah, there's one other that doesn't take Medicaid patients. We worked on this for a long time when we rewrote the tax code. And I wanna take some, I'm a little concerned about unforeseen consequences as to what we are opening up. And how this would help with.
Can I ask a question on the last topic?
Yeah.
So did you consider in economic development possibly just exempting municipal taxes and not necessarily any taxes for 5 years?
We can't exempt municipal taxes.
So like in the property tax bill, because in my property tax bill, I see my muni and
Oh,
my
yeah,
head.
but that's, if you wanna get hard and feathered real fast, that's the, that is the funding that most municipalities have. So if we force them to exempt, they're losing the money.
If I may, many municipalities charge lots of local permits for what they're doing, plus they're getting the blighted properties to be refurbished, so I wonder if it'd be more palatable. Yeah, okay, sure.
Well, if nothing else, the municipal piece is voluntary on the part of the town, and it is permissive, the town is not mandated.
And it was just the incremental,
Yeah.
so keep the base. Exempt.
You can talk to
Okay.
the league. I'm not even sure we have the authority to tell municipals, at least not ones in charters, what they have to do. Yes.
The deleted language on 39, 32 VSA 58, 1121C, that is referring to what, please?
That is taxable income for personal income tax. And what that is, it's it starts with AGI and just gross income, and then it's decreased at this point.
Yeah.
So it's decreased by if a person itemized medical
The
expenses
switch
at
is
a
right
federal level,
there. Okay, now.
they
let's
could
see it. Thank you.
also reduce here. Because
Why is striking on migrants turn out to be a positive? That
it's the way it's written is you can deduct your medical expenses, except you can't, you have, out of those medical expenses that you can deduct.
Yeah.
You have to take out of that deduction, the standard deduction for Vermont, and then also these types of insurance fees that are.
Problem with Wake Robin is you don't ever pay a nursing home fee. It is figured in your monthly rent. And if you never use the nursing home or long-term care, you don't get reimbursed. There is a set fee. And if you don't use all the services paid, you don't. So it's very hard to break out what was your medical,
Sure.
yeah.
pre-paid medical
And
expense versus
when we left it,
rent?
thought was that they could break out and say, this is the portion of your rent that is covering your medical care.
Even if you never
Even
actually
if you
need
never-
it.
Yeah, so this is the thing
Insurance.
for that insurance, if you have a nursing home. They didn't do that, I don't know why, but we will look at this,
You have to say quantify that
yeah,
for everybody.
yeah. So, we will look at that and that's, they really get interesting.
Do you want me to help with lining up testimony? I mean, I think.
I'm sure Wade Robin will find us. What I want is, find out. I'll probably Jen Harvey, who would be before. And Bill, who would do the estimates, yeah. And probably you know, what would be the implications for doing this to the tax? Yes,
Ted may know,
yeah,
Ted may have already done that work.
okay. Committee, we're back. Now, this was just a warm up. We're back to school. Now that we've done it at 8:50 and made clear what we intended, we've got to continue to look into 18% as a new base is going to make school taxes unaffordable for a fair number of people and increase our homelessness. We've already got people being having been put out of rentals because of rapidly increasing rent. Now we're going to rapidly increase the cost of staying in home. So I wonder what this. I don't know. Yeah.
So I really appreciate the slide deck, and I've been confused in terms of common letter of accounts. I was confusing the shared school district data management system, so I'm really excited to hear more about the two different ones. For this conversation.
Okay.
Someone is excited.
Better understand the difference stations.
It's good. Okay, so Madam Acting Secretary,
Hi,
do you have any kind of an arranged presentation?
yes,
Okay, then
and my presenter just
went out the door.
somehow was all the way.
Something was very important and I computed, so we will wait for her.
I'm just gonna.
Yes, Nicole, has not been in here to test.
I don't think we have yet.
Yeah, I don't think she has, so we should welcome her. Oh, it's a new. You can pull hairs out.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. It's nice to see you all. I think you all know me probably from some other committees. I'm Heather Boucher, the Secretary of Education. And I'm joined by Nicole Lee, who's our Director of Finance. I'm not going to say what I usually have said.
It's okay.
Which is she's the new Brad. But I
I'll
haven't,
explain that to the.
yeah, I haven't said that to this committee yet, but there's no replacing Brad, of course, but she's doing some fantastic work.
Yeah.
And so my understanding is that you may wanted us to come in and talk about the cost drivers with respect to what's happening with our ed fund, we're happy to do.
And is this one time or is this gonna be ongoing?
Yeah, I can talk a little bit about that, and then Nicole does have some slides to present, just to give a little bit of more data and meat to the bones. She has two different scenarios, I believe, to work you through, which I think I heard you perhaps saying, Senator Chip, that is what you wanted to dig into. So in general, I would characterize this, as you may have already heard, as a perfect storm this particular year. So we have the increase in healthcare costs, unless we do something drastic as a state. I don't know that those will go down, that's not my area, so that one may be something that continues. We have the ESSER cliff, as we call it, which is all those federal dollars. And this might be most familiar with the ARPA funds that came through COVID, which are there were a lot more of those, and they were for broader, all kinds of government operations at the local.
Those go into.
We had a separate allocation from USAID that the third tranche was our ESSER, just to kind of,
Right, so
make things a little
the
confusing.
department actually got ARPA funds and then the ESSER went right to the schools.
Well, so every state got allocations of ESSER funds, which were specific to education, and there were three different tranches. So the first one, each of them, 90% of these three buckets went directly to the LEAs. We were the pass-through to them. So we, for each of them, were able to keep 10% for state initiatives and activities. So there were three, and then our ESSER 1 is gone, so that's all been allocated, spent, it expired a while ago. That was actually spent for the most part on the real nitty-gritty about addressing COVID. So the safety precautions, how to get kids safely back into school, how to get kids vaccinated, well, all that kind of stuff, that was really kind of front and center about COVID. 2 and 3, were some of that for sure, but also starting to turn towards, recovery from the pandemic. So we still, the only one that's left is our ESSER, and that expires in, this September. So it's not allowed for fiscal year 25,
Next year's budget.
which is the big cliff that we're experiencing. We did literally just hot off the press get an approval from USAID literally an hour before I walked in here. That does allow us to have a liquidation period. So we will be able to spend those dollars through January 2025, but they have to be encumbered still by September 2024. So we do, initially, there was not even that tail, so we had to actually apply
But
for
with
that.
this allow schools that have hired, it sounds like a lot of behavioral interventionists seems to be a big group.
I mean, what this would,
Continue them with federal funds through
January,
January.
if they already haven't contracted by September 24, but then they'd be left with what about after January?
Yeah,
So it does provide some help, but it's certainly not gonna be, it's not gonna take care of the 250 that in the hole.
okay.
But, and that, you know, it's tough because we knew that those dollars were always gonna be one-time dollars. We knew that. We all knew that there were going to have to be hard decisions made because if you hired a lot of new folks on with these new dollars, they had to be limited service positions in the sense that there's no way our state budget could absorb, I mean, it was hundreds of millions of federal dollars one-time money.
That
And so,
seems to be what's happening with some of the schools, that the ESSER funds, they're counting them in last year's base. So they're only have a 10% increase this year, which is double what it normally is. But if you subtract out all of the ESSER funds, their increases.
and some, I think some LEAs did do that hard work and they actually knew that that clip was coming. And I don't know if you can you have much more understanding of types of business, managers about those conversations, but I don't want to put you on the
And
spot
we
for
have
that either.
another question.
Yeah, sorry.
Secretary, on that point, do you feel that that 5% cap that we have now repealed was softening and maybe a reason why not all the school districts were making those hard decisions? Was that in a way motivating people to put off those hard decisions?
I don't know if I can answer that. I think what I can say is that the way the law was written, particularly in terms of if you didn't take advantage of the cap the first year, you lost out on it for all subsequent years, was a big issue. However, I would also say, I think it's very hard, just in general, for most of our communities to let go of people. And I think that is just very hard in a small rural state like ours, with small communities. Yeah, so, the other factors are the 127, but again, I think we would argue that's just part of this whole perfect storm. What am I missing? Special education.
Okay.
I did cover healthcare and premium premiums. Special education has continued to rise, in particular our overage costs, I don't know the right term. Extraordinary costs, which are for students who really do need typically quite expensive services. And often because we've lost the resources for them to be served in settings outside of our schools and in community spaces, we've
heard
lost
that-
those. They're now going out of the state, which is a lot more expensive.
Yeah, we've heard that there's a 2 to 3 year waiting list for the small local schools that generally they're private schools, but they dealt with children that need some very specific and intense kinds of care. And why they just closed, were they a victim of COVID? I mean, why did we lose those schools?
I think I think some of the same employment challenges that we see in other sectors are happening both in those settings and then also in general in our mental health settings. So in addition to those extraordinary reimbursements, a lot of our LEAs have felt compelled to directly fund mental health services in their schools because they through no fault of the DAs, they just can't, the designated agency to provide mental health services, they can't hire folks. And so the schools can't have waiting lists, you know, they start it starts, you know, their compliance starts ticking, especially when a student has like a disabilities plan, 504 plan, or an individualized education plan, which is a special education plan. So I think those are also drivers taking on more of the mental health burden for the state within the education fund. And again, I don't think any of these should be shocking. You probably have heard of these, but just to list them all again.
We've known for a while that when it got to the late, you know, to 10 o'clock on the last night, we needed to balance the budget.
Yeah.
That level funding has been what's happened, and yes, we have depleted their staff. It was a couple of years ago, but they were offering $35,000 for a master's level position, and they could get $2,000 to $5,000 more if they went to the state or the school. Probably because they had unionized employees.
And even more and more private entities that are coming into the state that will offer even, you know, 20, 30,000 more.
So, yeah, and so they, you know, you peel off the private clientele and you've got nothing left. And
Did I miss any of the factors, Nicole? Okay.
I believe you captured them. Did we talk about inflation?
Yeah, just regular inflation as well, of course. You know, I should have started with that. Yeah, there's that. Yeah.
and we're really pushed by inflation.
Yeah, and I think, you know, we have heard and seen, you know, at the local level, there were some pretty big increases built into contracts. But on the other hand, our LEAs have the same workforce challenges that all of our sectors do. And so they're trying to balance what they can with, I need to keep really high quality teachers. So it really is a perfect storm of all of these factors coming together.
We've heard a lot about the increase in medical costs or insurance costs of 16%, but I haven't heard a number about staffing costs. Can you give me an idea of what kind of range you're seeing about staffing cost increases as a percentage?
Do we have that, Nicole?
Yeah,
Maybe this is a good time, if that's okay, to jump into this presentation,
Yes.
because I think that'll get us some of these details.
Nicole, you just need, you can introduce yourself for the record. So this used to be taped, and I guess it's live on YouTube tape, but so we know who you are.
Nicole Lee, Director of Education Finance, Agency of Education. So, I'm gonna share my screen. These will be available, after. Apologies on the delay. So I just wanna start this with a big disclaimer. And that is because I have been asked to present on two things today with a similar question, but the answer is slightly different. And so big disclaimer, we will be providing both pieces of the answers we are providing. But I personally dislike coming in and answering a question the same question two different ways. So big disclaimer, the sources of data are different in the two presentations. The first one I'm going to start at is a much higher level. I might as well just read the disclaimer. So the Agency of Education, specifically the school finance team, is aware that the two items presented today, February 27th, tell two different stories for similar data points. The data underlying these estimates are different. The intent of both is to quantify some of the primary drivers for a 200 million plus increase in ed spending from fiscal year 24 to fiscal year 25. The legislative survey data is a collection of responses from over 80% of supervisory unions. The FY25 preliminary summary includes other sources such as the state auditor's office,
a 226 updated ed spending statewide projection and estimates based on average inflation at a statewide level. So one is a survey, one has many sources. So to start with sort of two small tables, and please let me know if they should be bigger, happy to
I
enlarge.
think that could be a little larger.
Okay.
I think it was like that for
Oh, well, it's probably too large because you can't read the whole sentence, but that's really easy to do.
Okay, I might be able to split the difference here.
Yeah, that looks good.
So we're gonna start with sort of, the top table, is in a more traditional historical year. And that is, health insurance increasing. So I left ESSER in here very intentionally. You could take ESSER out, however, in a time when we have a surge of births in Vermont and we need more kindergarten teachers, we would often bunch that together and say like, this is why it's increasing. So it's an indication of a thing that is going on. Certainly you could take 25 million out of the 120, we get 95 million very easily. Then we've got salary and benefits. We're estimating that 75% of school budgets are salary and benefits and a 3% increase. And then for inflation, we're taking the remaining 25% and giving that a 2% increase. So then one of the important points here is 120 million is still a significant increase in the ed fund. And part of that is driven by what's happened in the past. As the base grows, every 3% or 6% of staffing increase we add is more and more dollars. So then the second graphic here, or the bottom, whichever you want to call it, so that includes that same 16% health insurance from the state auditor's office. It includes an ESSER number, and to be very clear, that is extrapolating the 80% respondents to 100%. So there's a little bit of wiggle in there, but we don't have something better at this time. That's salary and benefits at 75% of school budgets at 6% increase. And that 6% might actually be low, but it's double what we're normally seeing with the 3. And then we've got principal and interest on capital construction at 50 million. This is again an extrapolation of the
But salary and benefits extrapolated based on respondents as well, or just the ESSER?
just ESSER and principal and interest.
Thank you.
And so then, inflation is 6% on 25% versus, the prior. So that gets us to 239 million, about what we're seeing, right? It's, it feels really big, and it's also pieces and parts adding up to that big number. So what I do want to highlight is I've overestimated here the bottom number that we're seeing, 231 million. That is the FY24 actual ed spending compared to the most recent projection I have for 25 ed spending using February data. So if you see 1.955 billion, yes, that was the old estimate. We are seeing a bit of savings in the system.
You know, I was just gonna note, we did forget to say capital construction in the list, and I will say one of the things that did surprise me. And we heard testimony directly in House Ways and Means that there were some districts because of the cap. That put in deferred maintenance
We heard that
into that.
and we did a joint hearing. And I think that I feel very confident saying that the state has not helped with any kind of school improvements in 30 years. Not by 30, but getting there. And that we need to help schools. Where I'm gonna get the $325 million to solve the health and safety urgent immediate things, I have no idea. But it would help schools.
No question about
if we
that.
could do that.
I guess my surprise a little bit was because we just had a report on school construction, and so.
Yeah.
If I felt confident that. Those pieces at the local level were only put in for scenarios where we literally cannot breathe, like there is, you know, sewage on the floor, and make this up an
I think those are
example.
the schools that aren't, because those are the poor schools that
Yeah,
that
So-
can't
so
afford to do it.
that was the
Yeah.
surprising thing, and I think that was mostly just my sort of just assumption, because we were as a state trying to work. Granted, not immediately on a school construction issue, but again, I would say though too, it wasn't all of the LGAs. I think it was, you know, some.
Senator Brock asked a question before we dove into this, and I'm wondering if this answers it, but you are generally surprised that twice as much an increase in salary and benefits to what we would have expected in a normal year. Are those related to ESSER positions, or are these school districts proposing a lot of new positions? Do we know?
That's what I'd ask Claire.
Yeah, so, I'm gonna say anecdotally, although I've said that 100 times today already. What I'm hearing is that, there is a bit, this is sort of covered up by inflation, but I used inflation at 6% to tell the story. Collective bargaining agreements that were decided upon in a prior year and not included in last year's budget because they were completed too late to be included, have sort of a 1-2 punch in fiscal year 25 because it is, I'm gonna make fake numbers. They estimated 3%, the first year was 8%, so the budget had 3%, it's got 5% add from year one, and then it was 4% in year two, so we're seeing the catch up and the lift. In 25 is what I'm hearing from a number of districts.
But can you go a little step further, because you and I chatted about this, and so when I saw this, remember, my main concern, because we know most of the ESSER dollars are spent on salaries and fringe, and so. My question, right, to you was, are these mutually exclusive, so are these ESSER dollars also including salary and benefits, or are they separate from those, and I don't know if we can distinguish.
So there's a small bit of overlap in the inflation and the ESSER, and that is because I would assert that the ESSER was not in the base last year for ed spending because it was fully funded as, right, when you think about ed spending is budgeted expenditures less offsetting revenues. Last year, there was budgeted expenditure and matching offsetting revenue, so it didn't hit ed spend at all. So, I think that the 31.2 million here is new to ed spend, but at the higher rate. And so there may be a small portion in the inflation number that is a duplication. I believe it to be quite minimal.
Can you explain what the ESSER number is again?
Yeah, so that 31 million, I've defined it as ESSER, is what was previously funded by ESSER and retained in the district for fiscal year 25. So if a behavioral interventionist was paid for salaries, benefits, the whole thing in 24 by ESSER, that would not have hit the Vermont Education Fund because it would have been a salary and benefits offset by federal dollars that existed. Because those federal dollars have been removed, that salary and benefits is now an obligation of the Vermont Education Fund.
Essentially, what it does is it takes one-time money and makes it a permanent expense that we have to carry.
Yes, and increases that expense yearly for,
Inflation and everything else,
yes,
which is something we knew before we did it.
yes. I have, I just left, House Ways and Means, I have survey data. It is quite lengthy and requires quite a bit of explanation. I don't want to cut off good conversation, but I also don't want to get 5 or 6 minutes into something that was an hour and 15 minutes before, so I'm looking for guidance on.
I've got 3 more witnesses. We've got a little time. I can seem to go a little over time, but do we have anything that breaks out small schools from large schools and I mean, I'm starting to wonder if we can ever do affordable education when we have the number of very small schools that we have. Because this is the new base. And this is coming pretty close. What I'm paying in property taxes is almost as much as I paid for my house. And that's gonna just, there'll be more houses going on the market and more Airbnbs picking them up, and that's, to me, it's very concerning.
Do you have any of that data or just I can?
What I will say is, if the survey data that we received was at the district level, or the SU, should the cost, special education, the SU cost, so came in that way. If I was provided a sort of a small school people threshold, like, is it 100, is it 50,
Is there a national standard?
I don't know the answer to national standard.
Nationally, we are well below a standard small. So the schools that we think of as small would be considered as micro schools in
They
a
do not
national
exist in
context.
other states, literally.
Yes, and national is kind of misleading because you want to actually look at rural states, because that's where we tend to have this.
Maine is usually our.
Yeah, but even, you know,
They
places
do-
like Wyoming and North Dakota, like they have to also,
Yeah.
Alaska, they have had to
Yeah.
deal with this. I guess what I would say is that I don't know, I don't see a way out of this for our state long term without having these kinds of questions at the local level, and they are happening in terms of what are we going to do with this school, what are we gonna do with, you know, the overhead of
Yeah.
running a school. I just saw an article about Lakewood School in Green Grove District, which is a school of 27 students.
Yeah.
So I think that's starting to happen. I think the question for the General Assembly is, do you want to hurry that along? Do you want to let that happen more organically? I think, you know, we're halfway through the session, pretty much. The worry I have is that if we came up with just one metric that said, this is the teacher-student ratio, which is another way to look at this, or this
You're
is.
also off the charts on that one.
Yeah, well, they're related.
Yeah.
Not completely, but you know, there's some relation between those two. I think that it's an important discussion. I think there are a lot of factors that we need to contemplate that would go into that. So for instance, we need to think about, is it the case that we need smaller schools for younger students? Yes. Do we need micro schools necessarily? No. Are small schools the heart of our rural communities? Yes. So, you know, that would be sort of my lens from that leadership perspective of like, let's be careful about how we think about this. So older students, just developmentally, can handle bigger classes. But did that mean also that we never want to have any seminars for our high school students? Probably not.
Or no robotics, or no
Right.
computer programming.
Right.
And
What the evidence, if I may, Madam Chair, does show is that if you get to, I believe it's about 17 students and higher, which is pretty low in terms of a class size, and we can get you the statistics on this, that it's really about teacher quality. Because really high quality teachers are able, when you look at a span of 17 up to maybe, let's say 30 students, they're actually able to really differentiate instruction because they're seasoned, they could even be really high quality coming right out of college. And so I think, again, I'm trying to say this because there's different factors we want to think about.
That's as like nuanced and thoughtful as I've heard a education secretary be on this topic, so I appreciate it in a very short amount of time.
Well, thank you.
I
It's how we tend to think about this part.
I just feel like I never intended for us to consolidate elementary schools in a way that would make really small kids have to travel very far distances to go to school. I think we should continue to differentiate philosophically between elementary school.
Yeah, I mean, we went through this discussion when we did 46, the original one. And we did that with mixed results. But
And schools did not really change as a result of that 46, because it was a governance law that
laws and
I had as acting secretary at that time, the privilege of signing, well, the plan.
I mean, it's,
So I don't see how we can get around this problem though without having these kinds of conversations, because I think what I'm not saying is that it's probably a good idea to have micro schools throughout our state. I mean, I think, you know, just using the example I just talked about, I mean, it's over $1 million of an operating budget right there
yeah,
for what many would consider as a class, you know, of younger students of 27.
Yeah.
So to run that whole school, you know, would not typically cost 1.7 million, I think is what they were saying, to educate a class of kiddos.
and. You know,
Yeah,
I think that there's a balance, and having a local elementary school with 34 kids in it is good. But when the taxes go to the extent that some of those parents are gonna be not feeding those kids, then we've got a problem. And I think we need to continue, I mean, when we did 46, when we did Act 60, we weren't facing these kinds of astronomical increases. And I mean, the only state with a higher per pupil cost is New York, and that's because they pay their teachers a lot more. I'd rather have some larger schools and be able to pay teachers at a level that would allow us to get good teachers. Not teachers who may be good, but they're still working on their emergency certificates.
Yep.
You know, some of them will be really great teachers and some of them probably will decide, I don't want to do this.
well, I just will say again, there are a lot of people and families who want to move to the state and to our rural areas. And there is no housing. And
Including teachers.
yes, including teachers. And if our second home folks are mostly older and retiring here, they're also taking what otherwise would have been a single family home from a large family that could have brought kids into our school system.
I think that's,
I definitely agree. I don't want primary kids K-5 doing long bus rides. You need distributed small elementary schools so that kids aren't traveling far at that age. But besides the financial piece, the other aspect for the middle school to high school is I just don't think they're gonna get as good of an education in a smaller scale school. They get better education with the economies of scale of larger facilities with more access to computer labs and specialized instruction and all of that. So I'm not saying we need like 4 more schools, but I'm saying for student equity, it makes sense for the
it does.
primary.
And
Sorry.
I think
middle
we-
school, high school.
yeah, I think the demands of education and just the economics of what's going on is forcing us, I think, to talk about this and talk about what are the trade-offs and what is an ideal school size? I mean, is 3 kids in grade ideal? Is it good to have, you know, mixed classes through your entire grade school? We had one school before mergers that had 2 girls and 1 boy in the class. And they were wondering, so who was his friend? You know, where are his peers to learn to play ball with? And,
How old were they?
think about,
Reference
I think about
question.
7. They were
Well,
young
not
kids.
like that.
Couple of years
No,
later.
high school, I would not have made.
We have 2 former education chairs.
Right.
Yeah, at least,
And this, it's like we've just jumped into the middle of a conversation that we were having 10 years ago.
it did not go my way. But, several people have made arguments that I was making years ago. But there is, let's also keep in mind, among the extremely privileged in the world, private tutors are one of the benefits of being born rich. And that kind of focused attention. Yes, there are more opportunities in a larger school, but there are also intelligent, promising kids who get eaten alive in the big schools and totally swamped. And the smaller school will identify who a kid really is the other thing I would suggest, I'm fully aware, I was a teacher. Live teachers in the room with the kids are a great asset, but you can get more opportunities. That's where electronic communication comes in. And you still have a teacher in the room to kind of supplement and discuss and interpret what the kid just seen on the computer. People talk about the larger school, you might have a choice of 5 foreign languages, really small rural high school, you might just get 1. But you can, that's the kind of thing, that's where you go online.
I think a lot of that comes down to the quality of the teacher, big school, small school. You have a small school and you don't have a good teacher. That kid that's not quite like all the others is gonna fall through the cracks. And my grandsons are in middle school. They had a teacher who spoke French, so last year they had French. And this year she's gone and they don't have anybody that speaks French. So this year they're doing Spanish or vice versa. But that's not giving a child consistent learning with a language, but the teachers aren't there. And we're going to have to, get housing under control so they don't have to live in motels. Or turn down jobs, and I know schools where they've turned down jobs because they can't find housing.
Principals have turned down jobs.
And we may,
So we're looking at the things that are driving school costs,
yes,
not school challenges.
Well, we are gearing into education policy more fully,
I
but
spoken to the chair of education. He will look into anything we ask him to. Right, we're looking at this in the sense of, can we afford the education system that we're developing? And that's, we have one school whose per pupil cost is $44,000 a year. Somebody commented to me, that would be the tuition at a really good prep school. And they are not getting a prep school education. That's what we're up against.
it is,
That's one school.
you're right,
Yeah,
but
one. On average,
it's simple math that the costs are going up on the same tax base because we're not building significant housing. And that at the same time, we have less pupils and we're in a very vicious cycle where families can't move here. And meanwhile, we're continuing to put our school costs for fewer students on the same small property tax base. So this is math.
That's where I disagree, because our school system combines costs paid based on income and property. And what has happened in the 25 years is the income disparity has grown enormously.
Yeah.
So that you have more people who own homes choosing to pay on their property tax rather than pay on their income.
Well, I don't.
So, well, I
haven't
call
heard any
Rick in again and
statistics.
ask her and she'll just dispute that or
Okay.
not.
How does
I
that
think
show up
that,
in the
I
math?
think
though?
the secretary
You,
can
you're
answer
saying
this.
it's on the same, you made the.
It's on the same number of houses.
It's not on houses,
Okay, it's,
It's-
okay,
on income
for some,
or on property,
yes.
depending on the selection of the people that live in there in many cases. And we have more people with more money living in the state, particularly recently. And it's a much bigger tax base that is being taxed
It's only
for
on income,
education.
only on income. It's a much bigger.
That's the only one I was talking about,
Okay, but
much
we
bigger.
can't, yeah, but we aren't taxing based on income.
I know,
Okay, we tried. I would have given you those 4 months I sat in a chair and worked on that.
I wasn't talking about switching to just income tax.
Yeah.
I was saying if we got people coming here paying cash for houses,
Yeah,
buying houses
the
that working
prices are still
people
higher.
are no longer able to buy
Yeah.
because they're being snapped up,
Right,
we get some more money out of them.
Okay,
I'm ready to do that,
Okay,
but they are still paying more
we are getting off
for a house that has been valued at a higher level,
I
so
know.
the maps.
we
are.
agree and we'll,
Good,
I'm ready to
thank
listen.
you,
I
Quiet.
don't want us to stay the same
I'm
math.
ready to listen again, but
I think the secretary had an answer for us and she.
I'm not sure I have an answer, Madam
Yeah.
Chair, so I'm a little, nervous about entering into this piece of the debate, but I do feel it's important to point out, as you already know, that the very premise that we start with in our state in terms of how we fund education is really different. So we are here because it is the local communities that tell us how much we're going to pay for education.
Right.
Tells the state, and I'm just stating that as a fact, I'm not making a judgment call on that, there are good reasons for that, that's how we got where we are. But every other state, for the most part, has flipped that, now we got there for really amazing reasons around equity.
Yeah.
I would argue, I'm not sure we achieved that still, for some of the reasons that we're talking about here, and so. You know, I have heard some other folks in the state house saying maybe it's time to rethink that. I'm not gonna argue for that myself, but I do think that's something to maybe consider, which is. We are beholden as the state to pay that, and so
Right.
our cost containment is limited. Compared to, I grew up in New York State, a lot of problems with New York State, but it really is. Here's the state share of what you're paying, guess what, the rest you want, you're gonna have to, that's for you to actually raise through your local
Right, and
taxes.
see, we
It's our
also, we
constitution.
have the Brigham decision.
I know it's in our constitution,
Yeah.
I mean, the Brigham.
and that's inequitable too, I mean,
Yeah,
that,
I mean,
Mhm.
so
The New
we
York
couldn't
model's
do
an
that, we couldn't, I mean. Several of my towns would be really happy to go back. And do it, and that would just be carrying it, you know, that would be against the law since. Supreme Court spoken.
Is there not an alternative approach to it? And I would say in this 5% cap debate, increasingly, I'm hearing from very informed constituents that they're starting to realize that we really, as a state, are funding our schools across the entire state. And so we're having school districts, which they want to fund those kids, that are funding kids in those previously less advantaged communities. But now they might want more of a say over how we're spending the money across the entire state. So maybe we need to at least reconsider some of
the shared
reconsider.
cost component.
And the decision making. So maybe the state, which we collectively as a state are funding our kids' schools. The state does have a very good vantage point to make sure that they have equitable access to educational opportunities and not just a funding formula to make sure everybody's paying taxes. I think we need to better think about state standards and state insight and state transparency and state oversight.
Mhm.
Peeling back some of the local control to ensure our kids have equal access to educational opportunity in our
Well,
schools.
we were told, when I was chairing education, so 5 or 6 years ago, that we were very likely gonna see another equity suit.
No.
Because even though a penny raises the same amount, it's a lot easier for wealthy towns to raise that amount than for poor towns. And some of those poor towns who are pretty close to level funding, they're gonna see a big property tax increase because the wealthier towns are spending what they need to. And there is, the sewer on the floor isn't right, but the sewer in the basement is probably pretty close to what I've heard. We have,
There's sludge on some floors.
Yeah.
In some classes.
and there's some
Which-
kind of gas vents to keep gas, yeah.
I'd have to look at it.
Yeah, I
But
mean, there's some really schools in some very poor
Oh,
shape.
yes, yeah.
People that in the wealthier towns would probably not let their dogs spend days in, never mind their children. And we have a responsibility to that. How we do that, I don't know, but it is financially equitable except the financial ability to pay is not equitable.
In our current situation, it's right now up to those communities and their voters to approve a new bond and to approve school budgets that would actually address that sludge and the construction.
They can't do it.
If the state instead looks at those and uses our school capital construction bond and evaluates the needs and prioritizes subsidization and resources to achieve that equitable access to educational opportunity, I think we move in a better direction where we're making sure the resources are going where they need to.
Well, I think before we start spending millions of dollars, to rehab some schools that even rehab wouldn't be great. We might want to talk about, maybe it's better rather than rehabbing 2 schools with 40 kids in them, to find a centralized place and build a new, better school and put 80 kids in it or 120 kids in it.
Might
The school district pay for that as it does now, or would the state pay for that as it doesn't do now, and it hasn't done it for
Well, we did have some
20 or 30
We
years?
did have some things in with merging that if you needed to build a new school, I believe there was some financial assistance, but no, the state has traditionally done that. And I would assume we are responsible for it.
It hasn't caught on fire, that's. for sure.
No, it has not.
To that example, I think that decision will be better placed with our education fund for the whole state, with the state taking that perspective. Looking at city of Winooski, I love Winooski, Winooski's got a new high school, they're 1 square mile, and so it's great, but. If the state played a more active role, as just one example, do we need Winooski High School and Burlington High School? Maybe we needed 2 medium-sized high schools to serve both communities across town. All I'm saying is, I think there's opportunities if the state plays more of an active role in ensuring that equitable education, rather than districts, which are gonna be very provincial.
Yes, we have had limited success with mandating mergers.
Yeah.
And that was governmental mergers.
So you
When we merged the government, we've still got, they've always got that, they've always shared a high school. They still have 2 elementary schools, and the culture wars that you fought out on the school board. I mean, it's been pretty rough over there.
What I can say is we'd be very excited to work through some ideas together. Some of the stuff we talked about.
We aren't gonna do it this session, but I think over the summer is a time where we may see if we can't get some people together. I doubt that we have any money to hire anyone, since I've been told, don't even think about it. And I guess that's the other hard part. We've got a certain amount of money and I've been told, on an austerity budget. There's good things that are going to be cut over there. Because, and the schools at the same time seem to be on a spending spree, and I think it's that juxtaposition that's causing some stress in this building, that we have to live within our means. And schools tell us what their needs are, and we get blamed for raising the taxes to raise the money. But I think, yeah, it's time. I think that because we can't sustain these kinds of increases. Just can't. So we will see. We have 3 other, so I'm gonna move on.
I think they're still from the Agency of Education.
Yes.
So that's, yes, so we were going to,
Okay, no, did you have this all, you have people that,
yes, I think they must be waiting in the wings.
are they up there?
Or they're, okay, yes,
Okay, there,
so,
I've got Sean, okay, everybody is there.
Yeah.
Do they have a joint presentation or individual?
I think it's joint. I'm gonna let Bill introduce himself and then members of the team.
Okay,
And my understanding is that we're talking, and Nicole will be part of this as well, we're talking about the uniform chart of accounts and giving
okay,
some information on our PAWS FFDMF
okay.
state project. I believe that's what the committee
Yep.
wanted us to kind of talk
I
about.
know we've been talking about the chart of accounts and I came back and said, we have one. We do. So, okay, the floor is yours. Just, you know this rule, just introduce yourself for the record and who you're with, and we'll go from there.
Good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me okay? Bill Bates, Agency of Education CFO, and I am joined today by Sean Kuzno and Ted Gates, and we are going to provide you with a overview of our uniform chart of accounts that all of the LEAs are currently using, and then take questions as it pertains to the chart of accounts and then the SSDDMS project. Sean, do you have some slides that you would like to share?
Oh, yes, and I can share now, so I will do so. All right, everybody see the first slide? All right.
Yep.
All right, so we're gonna, like Bill said, we're gonna go over the uniform chart of accounts and then give a brief update on the SSDDMS. And SSDDMS stands for the Shared School District Data Management System. I'm going to start with the UCOA. That's the majority of the presentation today. We're short on time. Are we limited to 4 o'clock or?
No.
Okay, so I'll just go through the presentation as I'd planned, and feel free to interrupt if you need to ask questions. And so what is the chart of accounts? So a chart of accounts is a list of financial accounts and reference numbers grouped into categories such as assets, liabilities, equity, revenue, and expenses, and used for recording transactions in the organization's general ledger. The U in the uniform chart of accounts just means that we have a chart of accounts that all districts are supposed to be using. And in theory, they use it in a consistent manner. So the data we receive from them, we can rely on to make decisions or just to see what they're spending the money on. And so, like I said, we've implemented it, and the districts have been reporting on their data to us under the chart of accounts, uniform chart of accounts, since FY20. So we have 4 years of data, FY20 through 23. And at the same time we deployed the uniform chart, we also deployed the handbook 2, which is a 288-page document that helps the districts as they use the chart and guides them in how to use it. And then we also work with VASBO and the SU business managers. We're part of their.
Sean, if I could just jump in, I think I've been
Sure.
confused the term chart of accounts with SSDMS. Could you do me a favor and tell me how they interrelate as you're presenting on the chart of accounts, how they're connected or if they're at all connected?
Sure. So the SSDDMS it's a separate project that we attempted to put all the SUs onto the same financial system, and within that financial system would be the uniform chart of accounts. So it was a way districts could get on the chart of accounts. But it's not required to be in the SSDDMS to use the chart of accounts. Anyone that's not on the SSDDMS can implement the chart in their own system. Does that explain it well enough or for now?
Go for it. Sean, let me clarify a little bit, and then Nicole will correct me if I'm wrong.
Sure.
This is not my area. But so everyone has the same chart of accounts. They use the same lines for their budgets. They use the same. So that's the achievement. The SSDDMS was also a back office set of modules that districts could use for payroll, hours, like all kinds of things like that. And that's where I need Nicole to help me. Payroll, that's what I can say. There were other features too, but there were some disagreements. Some districts decided they didn't want that particular vendor we went with. We used procurement, state procurement, we went to all six, the way we're supposed to. So everyone has the uniform chart of accounts, but not everyone, it would have been much easier if everyone was using the same exact system. Like we're all using, like all the districts, for instance, were using PeopleSoft. That's not what it was, but it's like that. But there was some pushback on that.
So they're not using SSD, or 19 of them are out of how many?
So 19 are using software, right? SSDDMS software. Everybody's on the same, we can do downloads from it, it's lovely. Universal chart of accounts, everyone is accounting the same way. A special education supply at Wyndham Northeast, Essex Westford are coded the same way. So we can pull actual data, or there are crosswalks in place to all the different softwares to get that data in the same download to be trendable, usable, which was the goal of the universal chart of accounts. So my simple brain, software, accounting ledger is sort of SSDDMS, universal chart of accounts.
They're not all using the same software, so who's doing that bridging?
There are supplements. So the collection that AOE does is called StatBook. It's based on actuals. It's done after the year closes. There are supplemental forms that crosswalk that data, and the AOE, the district fills it out. The AOE scrubs it to ensure that we're getting consistent answers.
It's pretty inefficient.
Last question. How granular is that data, or is this really summarized, and are we really capturing from each district what they're spending on airfare and reimbursements, as well as all the little things that we're spending across them?
So I can give you a recent example from my sort of scope of the world, but then I'll let Sean answer the more granular. So I received a question about capital construction costs. And so I was like, I don't collect that in ed finance budgets, I do a higher level. In actuality, I got a download from a colleague that has a major function of 5,000, a minor function of, and those are kind of like segments of accounting. And it actually says capital construction costs code 5020 by district for the last 4 years of actuals. So there is granularity there. There are other cases where it may not get granular, as granular as you'd like. And Sean can speak more to that, but I sort of have been trotting out this capital construction example as like, I personally was impressed with the level of detail that was available. There's Power BI that Sean will talk about, but I'm gonna pass it back over to him.
Last question, Chair. Would it be more granular, and would we have greater granular insight if the school districts used SSDDMS rather than just this crosswalk over?
Not necessarily. I think, the uniform chart is the same no matter what system. So no, I think we can get the same amount of or granularity through either system, or the state system versus the other 4 or 5 that districts use.
But it would save work, right, Sean?
Say that again?
It would save work. It would
Oh,
save-
for sure. Yeah. Well, one of the benefits of the SSDDMS is we have a data warehouse that all the district's databases report up to. It's automatic, and then we can just pull expenditure data as needed versus how we do it yearly, where we still use that. We pull the SSDDMS users data out automatically whenever we need it, but everyone else, they have to complete the crosswalk form and submit it to us. So it takes them a lot longer, and again, we only ask for it once a year because of that.
We are discussing now the method by which apples and apples are compared from district to district to district, probably not.
In terms of how they do their accounting, yes.
So you can't, the local school districts aren't free to list and categorize spending as they suits them, they have to follow the same as the neighboring districts.
They,
Is that correct?
they
Or-
could, but they'd have to have a parallel chart of accounts then, which I highly doubt they would do.
Not think
Is that what the dispute is about, or so-called pushback has been about?
Sean, can you speak more to that? It's again more about the particular brand of software that is used.
Yeah, I think a lot of districts in the state were more comfortable with a certain vendor, and they felt like they were going to lose capability by going to the state system. Others just switched to it, and were able to work fine with it. But
Questions, so there are 19 schools on SSDMS or whatever, sorry.
Yes, sir.
SSDDMS, whatever.
Yep.
And how many districts not on that?
We have 50 total, so. Well, is it SU or district, Sean?
yeah, we count SUs, so we count all the supervisory unions / supervisory districts, and then the independent tech centers. Those were our number we were going for.
Okay.
So
For tech centers.
So
we have
19 of a universe of how many?
56.
36.
56.
56, thank you.
And you believe that you're getting apples to apples in this process, or you think you're not getting apples to apples?
I would defer that question to Sean.
yes, as best we can tell, we are. I think, now we're into the 5th year of using the chart, so I think each year the data gets a little better as we uncover things that some districts are doing wrong. We correct them, and then in the future year, the data comes in, cleaner, I would say.
So I was mistaken in some of my interpretations of this, but I did sense from you all that it would be valuable and saving on AOE time, or would you say school districts time as well, if all the districts use the SSDDMS? Is that something that we should revisit, or is it working as it is now and keep doing what we're doing?
I think for the part of reporting, it would save, both time. I think a complaint of the software was, especially for SUs that have multiple districts, the state software takes them more time to do their daily business. So that was a kind of a downfall of it. So, and there's some SUs that have, 5, 6, 10 different districts. So that's 5 or 10 different installs of or databases that they have to work through.
So in a self-leveling system, which our system has always been described as self-leveling, when you put all the information in. If school districts don't use the same system, the leveling is at risk going one way or another, is it not?
I think and I'm just trying to come up with an analogy. I think they're all giving us red apples. But the buckets they're holding the apples in differ. I don't know if that analogy works, because some are delivering us those apples in a yellow bucket.
Yeah,
Which is what we
Getting
recommended.
the same number of apples.
Right.
One of the,
Does that help?
perhaps, early on, when we were trying to put this system together, the question came up of, well, in Stowe, the town plow comes in and cleans the parking lot in front of the high school. We don't want to change that. And in another school district, the school hired a plow to come into the parking lot. To plow the parking lot. And Stowe liked it the way they did it, because they didn't have to pay school taxes to do the parking lot. They could use their municipal taxes to do the parking lot. And having used their municipal taxes, the amount of money they owed to the ed fund was reduced.
Okay,
I don't think that is what this
No.
tool is about. This tool is about, regardless of how you decide what you're gonna spend your ed fund on, here are the codes that we need from you from a state perspective.
You're not
to
getting, it's
summarize
not getting to, well, it would look strange if one school didn't have any snow plowing in their budget. I think that might.
But they could if the city's paying for all of it and it's not coming out of the
Yeah.
education fund.
Which means in the self-leveling process, by having the municipality pay for it in a whole town, you're saving a whole town money.
I think we outlawed that and stuff.
We did.
Okay, so
We
why
did.
are we having that discussion?
Well, why are we having a discussion about using different measures?
If I may, the reason we are is because the General Assembly passed legislation to allow that because there was so much pushback. It wasn't just the agency that made that decision. It was, this was a few
This
years
has
back.
been
So.
We interfered.
years.
No, I wouldn't say you interfered. I think you took testimony and heard legitimate concerns from those that didn't want to use the product that the state invested in, and that's where we are, which is we all agreed we were gonna pause it. Does that mean, I mean, again, given the context we're in, so resources are money, right? Like, so more hours to do things are money, whether it's at the local level or the agencies level, we're constantly being told, right, we don't have capacity, we don't have enough resources to do the work. So, but it hasn't, I would say, been like, it hasn't been like a priority for us, given that we made that decision. There are other bigger fish to fry, I guess, is what our perspective would be at this point.
Let's fry some bigger fish.
Okay,
This is very helpful. I'm sorry I didn't know the difference between the two things, SSD and this.
It took me a while to remember, so I'm glad you have reminded me.
Thank you, and for new people on those.
I'm really sad that my Apple analogy didn't work though. Usually I'm really good.
I actually like, I feel like we need a conveyor belt rather than buckets.
okay.
Nicole
We
started.
are-
My team has become very used to
We are
BJ's bizarre analogies.
I think the committee is running out of brain time.
Should we wrap up?
I think that might be good. I think you found out.
I think those were the high points.
Yeah.
Anyway, unless Sean or Bill or you have any like major critical points that didn't get made. And Ted, hi Ted.
No, I mean, we were just planning on going through the chart and showing you, kind of the different buckets that we can collect the data in or, show data in. And, we can come back another time or, we wanted to give the update on the SSDDMS, and I think we did, with those questions.
Madam Chair, would it be helpful if we gave you 5-minute overview of the types of data that we can collect using the Uniform Chart of Accounts? I think, Sean, you have a slide for that, right?
Good.
I think that would be helpful.
Okay. So let me see which slide would be best here. Well, I'll just flip through the different segments of the chart of accounts. So we have a location segment, which allows us to see expenditures at the different entity level, the school, the district, the SU, or the tech center. So this is kind of new that we've never collected data like this before. So that's one aspect we can look at. Level is another segment, and here we can see if the expenditure or revenue is pre-K related, elementary or secondary or adult. Go to program. So there's a bunch of programs that the districts track. The biggest one being regular education, but here a program starting with a 2 indicates a special ed program. So here is the place we would go to see expenditures for special ed. Also, the one starting with a 3 are the tech ed expenditures. RevSource, I'll skip over that, but this is just what type of money are they spending or receiving. And I do have a couple graphs like this that show where the money is being spent, whether it's federal dollars, local dollars, or a mixture. function. We have all kinds of different functions that the districts track. Instruction, the 1000 series are the instruction level, and then the 2000s are support. And I have a little graph here that shows, again, most of the money is being spent on instruction, or the second most is supporting the students. And I'll keep going. These are the 5 types of transactions that are in the systems. AOE only collects revenues and expenses, so that's sure.
I heard somebody say Power BI earlier. Do you have a portal up where you can drill into different districts so that this data can be a little more interactive?
Yeah, not a public one. So I think
one for the school districts to access some sort of dashboard so they can look at their spending relative to their peers?
No, that it's on the list to do something like that, or resurrect the annual SASRS report we used to do. We'd kind of convert that into a more interactive BI type dashboard. Yep.
I see a great deal of value in that as just a trajectory forward to enable school districts as well as the public at large to be able to have visibility as to where our monies are going inside of our school districts. I think that could do wonders to inform this discussion and also just to share best practices across districts. So thank you. This has been a phenomenal presentation. I wish I'd had it 3-4 weeks ago, but now I feel much more informed on this very.
Okay.
That's no slight on us scheduling it on me for last time.
No, I didn't know we had this stuff. I learned. Okay.
Thanks, team.
Is that it? Okay. Thank you all for putting up with the bedlam in here. We will talk some more.
Good. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you.
Right. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Sean. Anybody else? Committee, that's it. Tomorrow. Yeah, okay. Have we got 2:36? The siding bill?
For what?
I need,
You wanted.
I want committee discussion, and you can invite Annette Smith and Peter Sterling.
So she's coming in on Thursday as well as Rev, the Central Vermont, regional planning commission's coming in.
Okay, that's on Thursday. All right, do you have to do that? Okay.
Yeah, I can print up.
What do we got for tomorrow?